Okay, so this topic is called communication, and communication is the most important tool that a business person could have and should have. As you can see in the picture, that there's one person who's trying to yell into another person's ears. Now, that is not what you have to do. You have to be able to manipulate words in order to get what you want out of any situation. Now, communication is a two-way process. As you can see in this particular picture, it is clear, right? They have some kind of connection, they are talking to each other, and one should know how to do so. Now, basic definition that you need to understand of communication is the transfer of information or data from one person to another. It's a two-way process. It is, evident. Communication is a process, and a process is something that is moving from one person or one situation or one point to another. So, communication is a process involving the selection, production, and transmission of signs in such a way as to help a receiver perceive a meaning similar to that in the mind of the communicator, says Forthingham. Basically, this definition means is that whenever a person is speaking or they are trying to communicate something to another person, what do they do? They try to use such language expressions, such signs, so that they can convey what they are actually thinking. शायद आपने कभी नोट किया हो कि लोग कहते हैं कि मेरा मतलब ये नहीं था, मैं तो कुछ और कहना चाह रहा था. That is the hurdle between the sender and the receiver. कि सेंडर कुछ कहता है और रिसीवर कुछ और ही परसीव करता है या अंडरस्टैंड करता है. तो उससे उस सिचुएशन से या उस तरह की सिचुएशन में बंदा ना लैंड करे. For that, it is very important for a person to be a good communicator. Now, communication can be of many types. First one that we need to focus on is internal one. So, internal communication is something that happens within an organization. For example, जब आपको यूनिवर्सिटी किसी किस्म का सर्कुलर या नोटिफिकेशन देती है मिड टर्म के हवाले से एंड टर्म के हवाले से कोई भी रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस के हवाले से दैट इज इंटरनल कम्युनिकेशन, राइट. However, whenever the university advertises for new admission or admission open, that is not internal communication. That is more of a external communication, and it could be between two organizations or outside people. Like I told you, it could be a business letter, a memorandum, corriendum, or something that has to be outside the communication of one organization. Now, what is a process? It is a two-way process. Communication is a two-way process, and it happens between a sender and a receiver. Different ideas, concept, feelings, thoughts, and knowledges um, exchange between the two, right? There is a mutual understanding between the sender and the receiver as well. Types of communication: informal and formal, and it could be applicable to the mode of communication, and mode of communication involve written, oral, and non-verbal communication. Both styles are necessary. When you're working in a um, let's say private capacity or governmental capacity, what you have to do, what you are supposed to do, is to be able to communicate very well, राइट. आप इनफॉर्मल लेवल पे भी कनेक्शंस बनाते हैं और फॉर्मल लेवल पे भी, और उन कनेक्शंस को बिल्ड करने और रिटेन करने के लिए यू नीड टू नो हाउ टू कम्युनिकेट, right? So you need to understand the situation, and you need to determine that what kind of style you are going to adopt or adapt for a certain situation. जैसे अगर आप अपने बॉस से बात करेंगे और किसी फॉर्मल बात पे बात करेंगे, मैटर पे बात करेंगे, तो you will be adopting the formal way. Or if you're meeting your boss on a wedding ceremony or something unofficial, then you can talk to them as a person or maybe as a friend. Now, what is the difference between informal communication and formal communication? As the name suggests, informal communication is less structured, it is flexible, it is relaxed, more casual kind of language is used. जैसे अगर आप किसी से चाय पे मिलते हैं तो आप कैजुअल बातें करेंगे, आप ऐसी बातें नहीं करेंगे कि जो किसी प्रोजेक्ट से रिलेटेड हो. बहुत अनलाइकली है ऐसा. Then the focus is on correct and accurate spelling and grammar. We are focusing on the written format at the moment. लेकिन साथ साथ spoken की भी मैं आपको examples दे रही हूँ. Then informal communication is used mainly with your friends, your peers, and the people you are familiar with. And informal communication takes place mostly in the personal situations. Whereas if we have to compare formal communication with informal communication, formal communication is structured. It has a hierarchy, it has a certain agenda behind it. Formal tone is used, standard language is used, right? And correct spellings and grammar is focused, right? And it's usually used in a situation where you don't know the people, and it could be career, business, or educational situations. Now, there are three methods of communication: oral and verbal, that is presentation, right? Then there is a written communication, and then there is visual communication. All these methods of communication are interdependent and they're helpful. Obviously, whenever you're talking to your boss or you're giving a presentation, you have a visual with you and you're speaking as well. So everything is interconnected. Nothing is very abrupt in it, right? Now, what is oral communication? It's a tool that is used for sending a verbal message, for example, intercom, face to face meeting, or telephonic conversation, right? Or radio, maybe. Now, there are certain advantages of oral communication. You can get the instant feedback, it is more quick as compared to written communication. What are the disadvantages? Disadvantages are until unless your calls and your conversations are being recorded, otherwise, you have no record and it might be hard to remember. For example, whenever I share some information with you in classes, you don't remember. Actually, आपको तो written भी दे दें तो आपको वो भी समझ नहीं आता ना याद रहता है. But the point being that oral communication cannot have a record or it cannot be remembered easily for most people. It's not for everybody, but for most people. Then written communication, some kind of record is kept, right? Notice board, memo can be there, letter, email, fax. इन सारी चीज़ों के written records होते हैं, इसलिए इनको recall करना बहुत आसान है, इनका record रखना आसान है. What are the advantages of written communication? There is a record and you don't have to remember everything because you have a written record with you. The disadvantages are there is no instant feedback. आपको उसी वक्त पता नहीं चलता कि उसका नतीजा क्या निकला है, राइट? जैसे आपका ऑयल क्विज हो तो उसी वक्त आपको शायद फीडबैक देके मार्क्स बता दिए जाएं, जबकि आप पेपर जब अटेम्प्ट करते हैं, असाइनमेंट लिख के देते हैं, तो उसकी मार्किंग जो होती है वो टाइम लेती है, राइट? देन डिसएडवांटेजेस कुड बी ऑफ रिटन कम्युनिकेशन इज के ये कॉन्फिडेंशियल नहीं रह सकता. समटाइम्स यू हैव टू share certain documents with others. Visual communication, if we talk about visual communication, you can use charts, pie charts, videos, right? Audio ADs, and then internally and externally. जैसे आप पिक्चर में देख रहे हैं ऑफिस एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन है and he's trying to communicate a presentation in front of people. तो इस तरह से आप visual communication को use कर सकते हैं. Now, what are the advantages of visual communication? It's easy to understand. It shows trends and comparisons. जब आपके पास charts बने हैं, pie charts बने हैं, आपके लिए बहुत आसान है किसी चीज को explain करना. Moving on to the disadvantages of visual communication. Some people might not understand. अगर आपने सही से की नहीं बनाई हुई, अगर आप सही से explain नहीं कर पा रहे, तो random pictures cannot make sense until unless you are able to convey properly. And it takes time to prepare, so it's time taking. Now, there are certain factors, and these factors are to be considered whenever you're choosing a method for communications. ठीक है, आप किस सिचुएशन में किससे कम्युनिकेट कहाँ करने जा रहे हैं, उस बेसिस पे यू हैव टू consider these factors. First factor is cost, right? You need to see whether the method is cheap or expensive. Then you have to look for the speed, whether you need to, um, you know, share this information more fast or not, and what kind of time limit you have to set. कितना time लगेगा वो सारी चीजें देखना जरूरी है. Then comes confidentiality or secrecy. Then you need to focus whether the method is confidential or not. Then record can be kept. So will a copy of information exist or not? This is one of the factors that you need to remember while choosing a method of communication. Then destination. Is it internal or external? Now this is a typo. I wanted to write external over here, right? How far is it going? Right? आपने वो देखना होगा. Then modern methods of communication include internet, that is email, वेबसाइट और आजकल जैसे आप और मैं कम्युनिकेट करें थ्रू सर्टन सॉफ्टवेयर्स, तो ये सारी चीज़ें मेथड ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन में आ जाती हैं. देन टेली कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग इज देयर. जैसे जूम में वी आर कनेक्टेड more than 80 people can be connected in the free version, I believe. And इसी तरह से कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग हो सकती है. People can talk to each other. Video conferencing is there. So these are the things that you need to focus while communicating, right?